So those are the 6 kind of big decisions going in that aren't free agents. Now let's talk about some of the, and I'm only going to talk about the unrestricted free agents. I might use a couple exclusive guys. Number 1, Yash. He was making $4.3 million last year, which, by the way, blew my mind. I don't know why it blew my mind. It just blew my mind. So Yash Nyman's going to be an unrestricted free agent. My opinion, you let him go. You lost the battle to Rasheed Walker. I don't know if Rasheed's a starter, but if Rasheed's not a starter, then Yash definitely isn't. In the run game, I thought he was just not as aggressive and powerful as he needed to be. Number 2, Keyshawn Nixon. This is an interesting one because he's also a slot corner. A slot corner is a starting position in the National Football League in defenses. Now, you run a 4-2, you run a nickel. Slot corner is a guy, right? Isaiah McDuffie's first-team All-Pro from the Chiefs, okay? So he's really, though, from a value standpoint, you look at his corner numbers, and they're not very good. And I consider that he had some good games, and I like his aggressive. He wasn't good at tackling, and they completed a lot. I think quarterback rating was like 104 against him, 70% completion percentage, something like that. I might be a little off on those numbers, but I'm not a lot off. So he's really valuable as an all-pro returner. But the problem is he might not – an all-pro returner is going to give you $5 million a year. He might be looking at like, I'm a slot corner and an all-pro returner. I want, I don't know, $8 million, $10 million, whatever that number is. He's making 4 right now. So the value to the team is so high as a return because let's face it, without him, Versace, what did we have on the special teams units? Like, what are we good at? We're good at, he's good. That's all we have. And he's a weapon. And he's a difference maker. But is he going to be your starting slot corner? And are you going to try to pay him like that? That's a tough one, man, because if Keyshawn Nixon, he's the kind of guy that every coach wants on their team. And there might be a place out there that says, well, wait a second now. Packers are going to give you 5. We'll give you 8. And we'll give you a 4-year deal. And we're going to guarantee 20 of it. And he might just say, and we don't have somebody for playing slot. We like what you do. We think we can coach you up and make you better, but you're going to be our return guy. You're going to continue to be you're going to keep racking up all pros and see if you can have a Devin Hester-like career. He might leave because I don't know that you lock him. I just don't know how you lock him up. Like, even if, like, do you lock him as if you say we're locking him up as a returner, he's going to go, no, I'm a slot corner because they make a lot more money. How does that work? I don't know. I put 3 of these guys here because they're all 3 unrestricted. Darnell Savage, Jonathan Owens, and then Jonathan Ford. You could lose all 3 of those guys. I think you probably bring back Jonathan Owens. It's hard because you have – here's the hard thing. You move to a 4-3, which is still really a 4-2. It's just the way you think about the ends and the personnel. And obviously, the safety rotation makes a little bit more of a difference, especially when you're in like a base defense. You start playing these 13 personnel, 22 personnel sets that you're seeing a lot more often now. So 21 personnel bringing fullbacks in. You're going to need a physical, athletic presence at the safety position that can play at or near the line of scrimmage. It's solid in tackling, makes plays on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage, can rush the quarterback, slot pressure, all of the sim looks that you talk about. You need that guy. I don't think that guy's on the team. I don't think Darnell Savage is the guy. I think he's better around the line of scrimmage than not, but I don't think he's that guy just because he's 190 pounds wet. You probably want somebody with a little bit more, maybe a little bit more of an instinctive player, but maybe a little more of an enforcer. And again, we don't know what Hafley's is going to want, but I'm just going off of kind of what you see the trends in the National Football League and what we feared as, or we accounted for, I should say, not feared, accounted for as an offensive line. We didn't account for Darnell Savage's of the world. We didn't care if they're just faceless. You account for the Adrian Cams, the Adrian Wilsons, the guys that come, the Mike Minners, who was an undersized guy, but man could lay it, right? The John Lynches, the guys that are instinctive. They're actually purpose built to go into a position and make a play, and they're very consistent at their job. I just don't think we have that guy. So I think you bring back Owens because you think you bring him back on the cheap. And And I quite frankly, I think he has upside. I liked him in Houston. I like him here. He's not a perfect player. Rudy Ford's going to be you need to replenish this DB room with something. I think that's going to be a big focus of the offseason. You can do a lot of this news. So and it looks to be like there's a plethora of activity or of action and good players in the draft coming in the DB room. So between that and free agency, I'm looking at you're not going to get a premium guy in free agency. Well, we'll talk about that later, but you're not going to get I think you can get rid of these guys, at least two of them, and feel like you can replenish that room is my point. AJ Dillon and Patrick Taylor, who's an exclusive rights guys. You probably keep Patrick. I think AJ's seen his days here. I think this is the last you've seen of him. I like AJ. I just think the consistency for AJ, for whatever reason, just hasn't been what he's probably satisfied with. And sometimes you need a fresh start in a new building. Some of the stuff that they're running for Aaron just doesn't work with AJ. The line doesn't. It seems like the line doesn't block what he's good at, or vice versa. But the difference in even not the numbers, but just the way that the offense feels when he's in versus Aaron is so dramatic that I think you got to go find somebody. And we had Amon, we had Najee and Tony, and those guys had similar numbers per carry. And it was because they could all kind of run the same stuff. Now, if Tony was better at the screen game, maybe than Najee was better at the stutter game than maybe Tony. Amon's good at everything. But my point is that you had stuff that those guys were good at, but they could all fit within the system you were running. I don't feel like Aaron and AJ coexist the way you want to, just from a production standpoint. And Aaron's a top priority. Top priority. So Josiah DeGuara and Tyler Davis. I think you jettison both of them. You just pick up another guy in the draft. You got young guys in there already. I don't think either of these guys have. DeGuara is interesting because he can be a fullback. I just go get a real fullback. I would love to have this team have a real fullback. You can put him on special teams. He's going to play 20 snaps a game, and he completely changes the way you play because you go watch Juszczyk block somebody on the split flow, lead block. Watch Juszczyk, watch everybody else on their team against, and including Kittle at sometimes. Juszczyk's always up, forehead in the chest, doing everything right. Difference maker on lead blocking. Okay, so that's the kind of guy I think you want to go grab instead of one of these two guys who's trying to be a makeshift guy. You're trying to make something that they're not. Not that that's a bad thing. That's nothing to be bad to be said about them. I just think if you're going to keep a third guy, keep him as a real fullback. John Runyon. This is tough. The question is, can John go and start on another team? Because they're going to give that first crack this year at Sean Ryan. That's what it's going to be. He's going to be the starting right guard going into training camp as of right now, unless they draft somebody else, which is a topic for later in the discussion. If I'm John, I'm probably trying to go look for something else. I think that last year with Sean coming up and splitting time and gaining more reps, I think the writing's on the wall. I don't know if the Packers make a big push to sign him. They'll probably throw him a low ball offer. If John can go get money somewhere else, even if it's $1 million different, I think you just go take it and you try to reinvent yourself somewhere else in a scheme that maybe fits your style a little bit better. John's a very cerebral player, but I'll talk about John a little bit later. But I think that the opportunities that lie outside of Wisconsin are probably better than ones that lie inside Lambeau 1265 Lombardi right now for John Ryan. And then Bo Melton, he's a exclusive RFA. He's a no-brainer. That guy was so good last year, man. Like, the possibilities are endless with that wide receiver room. Number 3, what are the biggest areas of opportunity as I see them? I'm thinking draft and free agency, offseason moves. Number 1, safety. You might lose Owens and Savage. You might lose Nixon. I'm going to expand this to like high-level defensive back. So not safety, high-level defensive back. Because really, right now, you look at it, you go, we got Alexander. High level, okay? You could bring in, via draft, what if we would have drafted Brian Branch? What if they would have drafted Minka a couple years ago when all these guys were coming through the draft, when Miami picked him up out of Alabama? One of the best athletes I've ever seen. Those are do-it-all types. They can play slot. They can play free. They can play strong. They can play at the line of scrimmage. They can do everything. And there's a lot. Witherspoon out of Seattle, the cornerback, plays first year, is unbelievable. The year before, their other quarterback plays unbelievable first year. You can do it in the draft. I expect Hafley to pressure more. You need a guy who's just great around the football. Like, what's the prerequisite for success at that position? Just be really good around the football. Have a nose for it, right? Some of these guys are more instinctive than others. Go find what you would just call an instinctive football player that can play at the next level and go draft that guy. I said this before, I don't think that guy's currently on the roster. Number 2, might be a surprise to some of you because I don't pay attention to this a lot. Number 2 is kicker, man. Anders Carlson, 81.8%, 29th in the league, including between 40 yards and 49 yards, he's 4 for 8, and 50-plus yards, he's 3 for 5. He missed 5 extra points. Now, good news, Bayern Munich star striker Harry Kane, turns out he's looking to do some extra work in the offseason. He wants to be an NFL kicker soon. Now, I don't know if he's close to retirement or not, but I'd call up old Harry out in Germany and say, put down the sausage. We got bratwurst here. Why don't you come try out for the Green Bay Packers? Number 3, offensive line. And I do think this could be your first-round pick. I think left tackle could be your first-round pick. There's a lot of good left tackles in this draft. I haven't done a profile on them yet, but I will. If Back chooses to move, if we choose to get part ways, however that looks, if amicable, whatever, you need a absolute unit on this team. And I'm talking about mentally, from a physically dominant standpoint. You need a tone setter in this team. You can get that with a first-round tackle. There's a number of them. You need competition at the right guard and center positions, whether you keep running or not. Or, Sean Ryan needs competition, needs to be pushed. And it's time now to bring in a really high-level center to at least compete. I'm talking about second, third, fourth-round pick to compete at the center position for that starting spot. I think you're only really set at left guard, obviously with EJ, who's only I think his best years are way ahead of him. I think 2-3 years from now he'll be top guy. And then I say the same thing about Zach Tom at right tackle. So you got 2 guys you're set with. See what happens with Bach. Obviously, I think he's gone, but you got to build that line a little bit stronger. You can keep masking things in the offensive line with these new schemes, but when it comes down to it, you saw it with San Francisco, man. McKivitz got his absolute ass handed to him in that game. Run and pass. They were on their backup guard. Their backup's backup at guard, so fair enough. But those guys, the right side of the offensive line, if you wanted to point to anybody in San Francisco who blew it, it's not that I shouldn't say that. They were just outplayed by better players. And it came down to the biggest game of their lives, and they were just outplayed by better players. So you got to get guys up front that can do it. Number 4, running back. So Patrick Harris might be back on the cheap, but really, when I look at this, you look at Detroit, you look at some of these guys with the A and B. Oh, high-level running back in like round 2 or 3 really adds to this offense. You can get a guy that's, and we thought we had this with AJ, but you can get a guy that's maybe a slightly bigger guy. So I always think of it like Amon and Najee, where Najee is like 240, 245, but he's still a track guy, right? He's still a downhill, fast, right? So he might not be as good in the passing game, for example, but you can plug and play with any running that you have on the docket, because what you want to do is keep Aaron Jones's snap count at a relatively stable level throughout the year, until you ramp up in December and January. He's a really a playoff guy now for us. If you think this guy's going to make you think this team's going to make the run. As we saw in the Super Bowl, I said it before, high-level running backs are still a premium in this league, at least in the locker room, right? That's how they view them. And then the last one is linebacker. And I think if they drafted a high one, it's probably a referendum on where they think Quay Walker is. I don't think they'll draft in a high one, but I would say this. If there's an absolute stud out there early, you probably have to look at him. And I would treat this position going into a new defensive coordinator as the premium position on defense. As the absolute, you look at the best defenses of the league, linebacker might be the best spot they have. And you need your play caller and the kind of like the pulse of the defense guy to be at that linebacker position. Or if not, you've got to have one. I mean, who's that guy for the Packers currently? Like, my votes are Preston Smith, right? Who's you would just say, man, what a solid, good player he is. You wouldn't say what a Hall of Fame caliber player he is, what an All Pro he is. You'd say, but he's a guy. He's a leader, pulse of the defense, plays hard, does everything right. The second guy is Isaiah McDuffie. When they let him play, downhill, aggressive, sets the tone. Like you need as many of those guys as you can. Now, if you can get one that's an elite level athlete, the linebacker position, that's something. Again, it's down number 5 on my priority list because, quite frankly, I think Quay can turn into that guy. Again, the coaching change here, I'm going to overemphasize how important I think that is.